Tropical weather news of hurricane season. But the Atlantic remains quiet. Good day to all our viewers tuning in to this edition of the Weather News Bulletin. Today we bring you a special report, as global meteorological records consistently show that September is considered the peak period of the Atlantic hurricane season. In fact, each year this month marks the statistical high point of the season, when the likelihood of tropical cyclones forming reaches its maximum. Yet, contrary to both the expectations of experts and the constant concerns of coastal communities, the atmospheric picture this year has been remarkably subdued. From the Gulf of Mexico, across the Caribbean, and far into the eastern Atlantic, there are virtually no storms in play, not even a named tropical depression. On the satellite map, we only see a few streaks of thin moisture and scattered convective cells, none of which have coalesced into a tropical system. This leaves many wondering, has this season broken away from natural patterns? Or are we simply in a brief lull before things erupt again? The answer may lie in a careful analysis of the factors currently shaping the atmosphere. First, let us look at the Caribbean and South Florida, where a tropical wave has drawn attention. This wave has been monitored for several days as it migrated from the central Atlantic westward. Upon entering the Caribbean, it encountered a pre-existing trough stretching across southern Florida and out into the Atlantic. This interaction compressed and enhanced moisture, leading to heavy rainfall across Jamaica, Cuba, the Cayman Islands, and the Yucatan Peninsula. In South Florida, numerous areas have endured recurring downpours, with some locations seeing severe thunderstorms and gusty winds. Surprisingly, instead of pushing deep into the Gulf of Mexico as some GFS model runs suggested, this moisture band was pulled northeastward, sliding along the trough and dispersing over the Atlantic. In the short term, this means the threat of a tropical storm in the Gulf has not materialized. Florida residents should remain alert for localized flooding, small tornadoes, and lightning, but there is no imminent risk of a major cyclone. Meanwhile, the Gulf of Mexico and Western Caribbean present a paradox. Sea surface temperatures here are well above average, in some places reaching 31 degrees Celsius, essentially a giant fuel tank waiting for ignition. Yet the atmospheric layers above are not allowing that fire to spark. Strong wind shear at upper levels is tearing apart developing convective towers before they can organize. In addition, dry air spilling down from the north suppresses the moisture core. As a result, instead of closed circulations, we only see fragmented rain bands that quickly form and dissipate. This explains why such a storm-prone region has been so quiet for weeks. Despite the ocean beneath being primed with energy, looking farther east across the Atlantic, where Cape Verde waves roll off the African continent, we are seeing a train of disturbances with potential. These waves are often the seedlings of the most powerful hurricanes in history. In fact, many Category 4 and 5 hurricanes that devastated the Caribbean and US began here. Current satellite imagery shows several thick convective clusters leaving Africa and embarking on their long transatlantic journey. Among them, at least one wave displays organized structure and could strengthen as it enters the warm waters of the Main Development Region, MDR. However, Saharan dust remains a formidable obstacle. This hot, dry air carried westward suppresses deep convection, keeping storms from maturing. As a result, forecast models have flip-flopped, at times projecting storm formation, only to retreat later, leaving weather watchers feeling as though they are chasing shadows. Still, the ingredients for a sudden outbreak are lining up. Intra-seasonal oscillations such as the MJO are shifting into a phase favorable for Atlantic convection. This suggests that within 1 to 2 weeks, conditions may tip toward cyclone formation. When combined with the abundant ocean heat, a late-season boom scenario becomes very plausible. Meteorologists call this a backloaded hurricane season, where the most active stretch comes in the latter half rather than the front end. Turning back to immediate impacts, the Caribbean and Central America remain the focal points in the short term. In the coming days, countries including Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, Honduras, Nicaragua, Belize, and Cuba will see continued heavy rainfall, with accumulations of 100 to 200 millimeters in some areas. Given steep terrain, the risk of flash flooding and landslides is high. Low-lying and riverside communities must remain on alert. Northern Jamaica may receive over 100 millimeters, while western parts of the Dominican Republic could see up to 150 millimeters, enough to cause urban flooding. For Honduras and Nicaragua, northern and eastern coastal regions could collect over 200 millimeters in a week, raising the likelihood of widespread flooding and agricultural losses. Even small Belize is at risk, with flooding capable of disrupting transportation and daily life. For South Florida and the Bahamas, the main challenge is not a powerful hurricane but persistent rainfall, high tides, and coastal surf. Continuous downpours may flood urban streets, particularly in Miami. In addition, rip currents and rough surf increase dangers for beachgoers and fishermen. Authorities have raised warning flags at several beaches and urged residents to avoid swimming in rough seas. This is a prime example of how indirect storm impacts can still pose serious hazards. Even without a hurricane, the U.S. East Coast could also feel indirect effects. Though no storm is approaching land, offshore disturbances interacting with troughs may generate large swells, particularly along coasts from Georgia to North Carolina. Localized beach erosion and minor tidal flooding are possible. Some scenarios even suggest a small, mini nor'easter next week, bringing scattered coastal rains and gusty winds. While not severe, this would disrupt maritime and tourism activity. Thus, coastal residents should stay vigilant and monitor updates. In the northern Atlantic, Bermuda and the Azores emerge as areas of interest. Some models suggest Cape Verde waves could intensify and curve northward along the subtropical ridge, passing close to or over these islands. If so, strong winds, heavy rain, and large waves could challenge infrastructure and daily life. Even if no direct landfall occurs, long-period swells may still disrupt shipping and fisheries in the region. The key point: this calm cannot last forever. The tropical climate seeks energy balance. Once enough oceanic heat has accumulated, it must be released through powerful weather events. Many meteorologists therefore believe this early September lull is merely a pause before the storm. Once the atmospheric door opens, a burst of hurricanes is very likely, especially from mid to late September into early October. In this context, residents of the Caribbean, Central America, South Florida, Bermuda, and the Azores must remain cautious. Preparedness measures should go beyond major hurricanes to include prolonged rain, flooding, landslides, and coastal hazards. Communities should inspect drainage, reinforce roofs, stock food and water, and establish evacuation plans if necessary. Fishermen must follow marine bulletins every 6 to 12 hours, as even small shifts in forecast models can mean big changes at sea. Offshore trips should be delayed or rerouted to avoid gale-force winds and long swells. For forecasters, the continual back and forth of models reflects the atmosphere's complexity. Monsoonal oscillations, Saharan dust, MJO phases, and background ENSO conditions are all interacting to create a dynamic puzzle. Once several factors align, conditions could shift rapidly. This means forecasts for the rest of the season demand continuous monitoring and frequent updates, rather than reliance on long-range outlooks alone. To simplify, from now until mid-September, the Caribbean and South Florida remain the focus of heavy rain, but major storm threats are limited. From September 15 to 19, attention turns to the northern Atlantic near Bermuda, where offshore disturbances may emerge. Then, from September 20 to 25, the MDR and Cape Verde waves may finally find favorable conditions to explode into strong hurricanes, storms that could either recurve into the open ocean or march westward toward land. This will be the most critical window for the Caribbean and the U.S. to monitor closely. In conclusion, while the Atlantic currently appears calm, the seeds of an active hurricane season are quietly taking shape. The tropics are defined by surprises, and today's tranquility may be tomorrow's storm. The key takeaway is clear: remain cautious but calm. Prepare thoroughly but do not panic. And trust that with close monitoring from forecasting agencies, communities will have timely information to respond safely. Thank you for joining us on today's Weather News Bulletin. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share your local weather situation in the comments below. We will continue to provide updates so that no change in the weather catches you off guard. Until next time, goodbye and stay safe.